So it just cycles through. All right, well, we'll just do the best we can do, I guess. All right. Well, are you ready? Good. You ready, Bart? All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. We'll call to order the Town of Farragut's Visual Resources Review Board meeting for May 2021. I know the first thing to point out is that we're all excited to actually be in person again and to actually meet some of our newer members in person who've been on virtual for almost a year. So glad to be here. So the first item on our agenda tonight is the approval of the minutes from the April 2021 meeting. So is there any discussion from the board members about those minutes that were presented to you? If there is no discussion, is there a motion by the board?
I'll move for approval.
A motion for approval by Alderman Pinchot. We have a second. I guess we're going to follow the same procedure that we've been following while virtual. So at this point, we'll have a roll call vote for the motion.
Okay. Mr. Armstrong? Yes. Chairman Lehman?
Yes.
Ms. Moore? Alderman Pinchot?
Yes.
Ms. Stowe? Yes. Mr. Wright?
Yes.
Okay, so motion passes.
All right, so we're going to move down to the ground-mounted sign applications, and the first item on the agenda tonight is for Tennessee Cutlery Tenant Panel Design, 11414 Kingston Pike. So with that, we'll turn it over for staff comments.
Okay, this is for a tenant panel. It's actually already been installed, so they've been double billed for it as a penalty for putting it in without a permit. Here's the design of the sign. It's going in an existing structure there, really across from this larger shopping center area. It's on the other side of Kingston Pike. I think you're probably familiar with where it is. Is what it looks like in the sign, seeing the entire sign. There's already landscaping in place. It's legible. The hedge there behind it actually blocks it coming from the other way, or blocks a portion of that sign. Really, the owner should trim that down, but it's an existing hedge. But that's the application. It's, like I said, it's in an existing sign structure in an older shopping center. It was installed, so we did charge them the extra fee for putting it in without a permit.
All right, so we'll go down through board members, give everyone an opportunity to ask questions of staff. So, Mr. Wright, do you have any questions or comments?
I don't. No questions, no comments.
And Alderman Pinchot?
Yeah, I do have a question. Did you say the sign's already installed?
Yeah, it had been.
That's another example. Why can't we get the message out that these things have to be approved before?
That there seems to be some turnover. The gentleman doing this was, with a sign company that we deal with often, but he was new with the company, and they had gotten a permit for the wall sign, and he just assumed he was good with the tenant panel as well. So it's just, he just wasn't familiar with the process that we operate with here, and they went ahead and installed it.
How can we get the message to the landlord? I think the landlord's the one that should be responsible for making sure anybody that they sign up to lease their space should have information about the sign.
I know that Trevor Hobbs is going to start a program of going around and meeting with a lot of the commercial property owners and in town and new businesses as they're coming into town. And he's probably going to bring Holly Marlowe with him, who's one of our codes enforcement people who deals with wall signage. And they'll have an opportunity to further explain a lot of our permitting process, a lot of the codes that we have in place, and that'll include signage. So hopefully that'll help. That's something that they've wanted to do for a while, but obviously it was on hold because of COVID, and not wanting to be going around meeting with everybody. But Hopefully that will improve it a bit. I mean, most of the sign companies and the people that have worked in the town for a while are aware of that. It's just sometimes the newer people in the company, or if we get a vendor, like a sign company from out of the area that doesn't do a lot of work here, sometimes they're just not that familiar with our process.
Well, I have no problem with this sign. I think it looks great in my opinion. It's just that if I didn't like the sign, or if we as a group didn't like the sign, and had to make them go back and replace it, that's a waste of money on their part and time. So we got to get this corrected. So I'll talk to Trevor as well. Thank you. I have no further questions.
All right, thank you. Ms. Stowe? All right. Mr. Rogers?
Sorry, I have no comment.
All right. Ms. Moore? And Mr. Armstrong?
I will agree with Alderman Pinchuk that something needs to be done, but the sign looks good.
And agree, the sign does look good. I don't see any problem with it. And then we're all in agreement that it would be nice for them to know one ahead of time, because we've had this happen a number of times over the years for sure. All right, do we have a motion on this item? All right, we have a motion for approval by Ms. Stowe. Do we have a second? Second by Ms. Moore. Is the applicant present? You're not here for this one, are you?
Nope,
No?
not on this
Okay.
one.
Sure.
Well, the Farragut Business Alliance, one, usually gets involved, and also the chamber. So we have two groups that should be. Yeah. Yeah. Good point.
In addition, there's a whole lot of information on the town's website about all this as well. Do we have any citizen comments? Need to read in?
No.
Okay. So I will expect there's probably no amendments to the motion, so hearing none, we'll go for our roll call vote.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Chairman Lehman?
Yes.
Ms. Moore? Alderman Pinchuk?
Yes.
Ms. Stowe? And Mr. Wright? Okay, motion passes.
All right, so we'll move that down to the next ground-mounted sign application, which is U-Bank at 155 North Campbell Station Road, just right over from us here, and one that has been a bank of different names a couple of times, FSG, Atlantic Capital, that we remember being in there. And so with that, we'll turn it over to for staff comments.
Okay, this is a new ground mounted sign application. There was a sign there as late as 2019. It's going to be in the same general area. I've got a section on a later slide. But they're installing a new ground mounted sign for the development. They've got two designs. The first is the one that they initially applied for, which is this one. It's a lighter background. They've got more than a 2-foot base, so they're fine with that. The brick and match the building. And the second design is this one, but a lighter lettering and a darker background. This is one that staff asked them to put together in compliance with the town's architectural design standards. There's some discrepancies there in the landscaping, and that was something that, we could just resolve for the final permit. I wanted just to, get that clear to know which one you approved tonight. It'll be located up there in the corner, the top part there, at the top of the dome is actually where Campbell Station Road is. And then there's access easement there on the right of the image. This is a side entrance into the shopping center and by Planet Fitness in that area. So kind of oriented. signs. This was their preferred. This staff asked me to do, and the reason we asked for that was, I have a handout that I gave you all. The sign regulations for ground-mounted signs in particular, direct both the staff and the board to consider the town's adopted architectural design standards. And one of the first pages in the sign section of the architectural design standards, section 1.3, part C, calls for dark backgrounds with white lettering, or I should say light-colored lettering. We've been trying to force that as much as possible. We'll still have to consider existing signs on the property, like existing tenant panels where they're already all lighter background. Sometimes some buildings, it just wouldn't be appropriate and it wouldn't be consistent architecture with the building. But as much as possible, we're trying to follow the guidance in the design guidelines. So some of the more recent signs have been submitted to certain units with a black background with lighter lettering. The new boys, again, with a sort of a dark red background with white lettering. So staff asked the sign company to prepare that that essentially flip the coloring from a light background to a dark background. So based on architectural design standards, staff would have to recommend in favor of the darker background version. Because it's a new sign, we'll have to have it surveyed in and make sure it meets the setbacks, because they're right at the setback line for this size sign. But apart from that, we recommend approval subject to the survey aspect and with the dark background. There is someone here to represent that.
Okay. Questions, comments for staff by the board? Mr. Armstrong?
Well, so explain to me, how old are these guidelines? Are these new guidelines?
They were in place when I came to work here about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
A little over 3 years ago. A lot of the newer signs have been compliant as much as possible.
Right.
But, they are in place, and the new sign ordinance, I didn't go back and check the old language, but the new sign ordinance does reference these regulations. So, or I should say these design guidelines. So, we feel compelled to, to look at them and try to be as consistent with them as possible when we're reviewing it at the staff level.
So a follow-up question. So our individual signages, so if you had a strip center, the top sign then would be a dark color, as in your second example, and the signage, the individual panels, tenant panels, would be light background?
Well, actually, on the second and third example are, they're actually X'd out. They're not even kind of recommended.
Oh, I see.
But for various reasons. So, when we're looking at this, we're having to look at, the ordinance, the sign ordinance requires architectural compatibility and also compatibility across shopping centers. So, like, we have many centers now to where, they have a uniform theme, like, all of the signs are white lettered, like the over by the Starbucks. And we sat down with the owners and said, guys, you're going to have to pick a common theme, and everyone's going to have to follow it. Out at Elliott's, we did that. Originally, Dunkin' Donuts came in, and they wanted it to be all orange lettering, and it was, that was just a no-go. So they all got together and they went with the white lettering and just the little color splashes for their logos. And so we've been working at that. Now, obviously, in some of the older centers, that's not doable because, the signs within the center are supposed to be consistent in terms of color, illumination, and those sort of issues. So, if we already have a center that's like a white stucco, which wouldn't be allowed to be built now because most of our buildings now have to be predominantly brick, but, or I should say masonry. But, you know, something like that, like out in Turkey Creek, there are some buildings out there where it's a lighter colored building, so all the signs up there to be consistent with one another are black lettered. You know, so we're trying to weigh the design guidelines along with some of the other guidance, both in those guidelines and in the sign ordinance, in terms of trying to have more consistent themes within shopping centers. But for a lot of the freestanding businesses now that have been coming in, we've been trying to go in this direction.
Yeah, so I think my comment is, and I appreciate, I understand your explanation. I think my comment is, it's not, it's a system.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's hard to be like, maybe I was not really aware of it, just because it's been so frequent news centers where you do this out there. So I just felt like it was very narrow as far as colors go, but I understand that it's accepted.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that as things go out of business or move and we get new signs coming in, you know, it's a gradual evolution to where we would be more consistent with this. You know, it is something that I'm going to talk to Mark about when he gets back from vacation next week. And maybe we need to have a workshop sometime, you know, and go through these design guidelines and then also look at the sign ordinance and think about how to apply it in a, you know, because you know, there are a lot of trade-offs. And, you know, some of the centers it's no problem in, you know, everything's fine. You know, the owner of the center wants a consistent theme and they want everything the same. And in others, you know, we have businesses that want to do their own thing and we're oftentimes, you know, you don't see it as much as a board because you're only looking at the ground signs, but we see it a lot on the wall signs because we have to look at it in terms of, you know, style, color, and illumination of the sign. So, you know, we'll have someone that comes in a center that's all channel letters, and they want to put up a cabinet sign. Well, the answer is no, you know, and so it's, you know, just, you know, kind of, you know, trying to strike that balance. But on this one, you know, the reason we asked for the darker background sign to be prepared was to be consistent with, you know, with that section of the design guidelines, and it is a brand new sign. So.
Understood.
As I understand it, it's essentially like a channel letter sign put on the thing. So the letters will be internally lit. You know, so it's you know, each letter is lighted independently and they're then affixed to that background. So it'd be the same as you know, like a channel letter type sign that's on the side of a building, except it's going to be on the side of the sign. It's a light stucco, yeah.
What we're trying to do, design this sign, was to match, and I apologize, I didn't make copies, the ease of the existing building. Also, the brick of the existing building. And, or I have a nice conversation concerning the difference in cost. My customer, and I'm here to speak for my customer. There's no, I don't have a dog in the fight as far as the colors, other than they predominantly use this logo, with the blue back, and the U, versus the white back, with the blue background. This is, they probably use this on their, they use this on their stationery, they use it on their, you know, everything they have, except there's a couple of instances on their website where it is. So that was our intent to, and we will, if this one's approved, match supposedly possible, obviously, the needs of the building. So, and that's the reason, that's really the reason
then it's just like the process of where. Okay. And then the blue one, the dark blue, is it still stuff that's just painted a different color?
Yeah. That's a bright letter, letters.
It looks like it does.
No, the blue shows up well through light. It doesn't show up well. Now, that's a bright. That's a. I don't mean it's this color, more or less. You make your hair dark.
I'm confused a lot.
You're here.
So this would be consistent. Oh, that. Is this what's consistent? Okay.
This is, that's better than out of the hole. I like the blue one. I like it out of the hole.
Yeah, they originally turned this one in, and then when we reviewed it, and we looked at the architectural design standards, you know, and comparing it to some of the other signs that have been done recently, that we were compliant, and it wasn't an issue like the Suzuki's and the Pathway sign. You know, I asked them to go ahead and put together another alternative that would be more compliant with the design.
I don't think the coloring the PD and the line is fine. Do we need the name to think of that sign when we make it? I think the blue, you need to put maybe more of the blue color that's in this sign. That would, or the blue color, and use the white line, that might be better. Or just the blue.
This is their logo. That U is their logo.
I know, but I think the blue looks better. So my other question is just about the general side sign guidelines. The raising point is, I was at some of these meetings and departments and cities and TV. Come up with it, it was, even if these were guidelines, these were not ultimatums. And there's a lot of guidelines here to help guide people towards certain things. And I'm just curious, when these became ultimatums instead of just guides for people to design.
Well, the town adopted them, so, and then the sign ordinances, you know, references them. So, I mean, they, you know, there are numerous guidelines in there, and some of them do conflict with one another, so, you know, sometimes we have to, you know, make a trade-off and on, you know, exactly how one fits in with another, and we, you know, find that a lot of times, again, with some of the older centers where things are supposed to be consistent, you know, architecturally with the building, and putting, you know, white letters on a white building wouldn't make a lot of sense. But, you know, on the ground signs, particularly when it's a new ground sign, you know, we've been at least pointing out, you know, the dark background with the white lettering is.
Building, like when I look at it, it's like, okay, it's not compatible because it says dark background, I'm good with that. However, knowing that it's actually compatible with the building,
Yeah.
I think it looks more consistent than this, because this is out of place, seeing the building, knowing what the building's inside, working out behind it, seeing the gutters falling off. I think it looks more consistent with the existing building and it being a freestanding building as a sign that's been there, in that business that left the sign there before, it would look like this, they would have re-put the face on the front of it, and it would have been fine, because this is what the sign looked like before. So this, in my mind, matches these guidelines because it is architecturally compatible with the existing building, as long as they use the same stucco background that matches the building that's there. If it's a white cloth, I don't think so. If it's the same material that the building is, then I would say, I would agree with this one. And I do think it stands out more as they pass them by because there's navy in the view, and if the background is the same color,
and we looked at that. Now, one of the previous businesses was there, the Atlantic Capital, if you look on Google Earth, it had a dark blue sign like that, and it looked okay with the building. So, I mean, we didn't think there was a clash there, but, again, that's a valid opinion is, providing they don't make any architectural changes to the building.
Yeah, I agree. Are we open for them? Do I need to wait?
Oh, yeah. All right. Mr. Wright.
Sorry. I forgot the order here. I really echo a lot of what Brittany said, and I was going to ask some of those very same questions, Brittany, so thank you for that. And it seems like, Bart, to the point you just made about the previous tenant that had the dark sign, if they didn't object and it fell in line with these guidelines, then certainly we're going to move forward. And of course, I wasn't here, maybe we weren't here at the time, but I would just echo and reemphasize that it does seem like, and with the guidelines in place, to meet the architectural standard of the building, this seems to actually look really sharp. And considering the preference, the desire of the tenant, that we would consider that, and that would be something that would, I want to say, override or supersede the guideline, but it is a guideline, and there's room there for the building owner tenant to ask for that. I certainly think it looks good. It's a good match. And again, echo a lot of what Brittany said. It was really good to clarify, I think you just touched on the part, previous signage and what was there before. And so, I guess we're repeating some, but I think that sign looks good, especially I think matching the building.
All right. Alderman Pinchot.
I'm all for following the standards. But I think there's times when you need to make an exception. I think this is one. I like the fact that you're trying to match the sign of the building. So I would agree to the sign, subject to if you use the same material on the background of the sign that you use on the front of the building. That's our plan. It's an aluminum cabinet with a stucco. Which is the same thing as it's on the front. I would approve this subject to that. Yep.
All right, Ms. Snow, did you have any additional comments?
I like this sign better. It's the blue that lost my eye. I think that blue probably needs to be in there. And I agree with what people are saying. You're going to use the same materials on the building, that this one visually to me is much better looking than that dark brown. That dark brown is just the one, the next one, the other, the one that's the dark brown on top.
You're talking about the blue one? It's all blue.
But what I'm seeing right there on the sign is dark green. You all understand blue? Where? On the sign.
I can take black.
Sorry. But I'm seeing brown, and that's what I thought the first sign would be the one I would choose. I just think it looks better. And I do like the blue staying on there because you got blue. And I'm concerned now when I'm seeing the dark brown sign and everybody else is in blue. Okay.
All right, Mr. Rogers.
I really do like this first sign a whole lot more than the second sign. So if there was to be an exception made for this one sign, I would like that a lot better. That's all.
All right, thanks. Well, it sounds like there's been a lot of conversation about this sign. You're talking about the building itself is now painted and colored and the stucco, the same as you're planning to do this sign. But that stucco on the building could be repainted.
If that's the case, then I will.
I guess
They're not planning on doing anything.
that's what I'm kind of saying. It could be repainted down the road sometime. So it sounds like the subject too that we're about to have here, if I'm hearing everyone correctly, would be that they would not be able to change the color of the building because we're approving this sign to match the building. Do you think they would have issue with that?
No. But I don't, they're customers, they're not relatives. I can let them know that. That's the best I can do.
Okay. And then, I don't know Eubank. Are they, I don't know how big they are or where else they are. Number two. So, okay. So the other bank in Jellicoe, does it use the exact same coloring in the U? Does it use the same blue in the bank?
It does on the building, but not on the monument. It uses the reverse logo.
In Jellicoe?
Yes.
And what's the background of their sign color there?
I'm sorry.
What's the sign background color there?
Blue.
In Jellicoe?
It's got the white bank.
Okay. So they're already using the other style at their other location.
Yeah, and that's why I said that this is the one that they use. So really, it's a good match. 75% of, 75 to 80% of the time, this is their logo. It's just.
Well, when you said it was a Yelp logo, I was thinking of the 50 or 100 banks out there use it. No, it's not, it's just a city.
Usually on website and letterhead and card units.
So,
Actually, I guess there's one and a half, but it doesn't open until September.
so the fact that they have this other design, this other sign somewhere else, this is not a foreign to them because that's what they use. So,
This is what they prefer, which is what I said at the beginning.
uh-huh.
And just do the circle connect with the background. I did the sign for them up there too. The background was existing, had to have white lettering. Background existing,
I see.
this is not.
Okay. All right. Mr. Armstrong, you have some follow-up?
So Bart, so let me just, all right, knowing this, so I didn't talk about the actual sign when I went through. I agree with you that the sign right here looks best for the logo, okay? But what we're talking about is guidelines and going against those guidelines. And our new signage amendments and everything we worked on the last 2 years references this right here, okay? So now, if we approve a sign like this, what happens the next time somebody comes in here?
Well, I mean, it'll be the same discussion, and you'll have to look at it from the standpoint of factoring in, various elements of the guidelines with the building. Like if you look at the section 1.3 in general, the bold heading at the top there is use colors that in the sign that are compatible with those of the building facade.
Right.
So some members seem to think that the lighter background is more compatible with the building facade.
Right.
In this case.
Right. It
Now,
would
but
And I also feel that these need to be addressed in the near future because I do wonder if they're somewhat outdated. I'm looking at names of colors and going, that seems very dated to me. How long has this been out there? But you're right. I think
it really comes down. It really comes down to, the town has been trying to create, we talk about branding for companies and they want to use their brand on a sign, but the town is trying to create a brand in and of itself, and particularly in its public spaces. And so, how much consistency do you want in terms of signage in how much compatibility with building architecture, and then how much compatibility do you want, from one business to the next? Do you want to drive down Kingston Pike or Campbell Station and have more of a hodgepodge of, each center doing its own thing, and maybe just consistency within the Or do you want a more unified approach throughout the town? And, you know, things like that, and oftentimes in zoning and planning, you know, it's very evolutionary. We don't have a magic wand, we can't just wave it and say, you know, fix everything in town in the next 6 months. You know, as things are replaced, things become more and more in line with what the town wants to see. So, you know, it's you know, where you want that balance to be as a community.
Well, it most certainly does. And I think that's the issue here, is that without this piece of paper, we would probably approve the first sign. But with this piece of paper, you could, but I think the argument, and then the fact that there's only 2 now that we know, and the other one does have this blue sign, it's conflicting.
And C is part of 1.3, but, you know, there could be locations where there's a conflict. So then you have to look at the other standards as well, you know. And, you know, we use these like, again, on one of the earlier signs, on the Surguni sign, you know, they came in with neon colors. And again, we looked at that section and said, you know, you're going to have to tone those down. And so they did.
But based on section 1.3, as I read it, either of these signs could be approved because you've got the facade, you know, match with facade. That's in 1.3, 1.3a. But then you go to C and it talks about the dark background. So, and then it says examples of preferred background colors. So it doesn't say it must be that color. So
You're right.
That adds a little confusion to the
This
whole
first
debate.
sign hits 3 of the 4 points of 1.3. 3 of the 4 this first sign hits.
Also says design materials that are compatible with the architectural character and materials of the building. So the first one also matches 1.2, whereas 1.3 could go either way.
Right.
And this is why maybe I'm going to speak to Mark when he gets back. And maybe it's something you got the workshop to go through all these and think about what they mean, you know, from the standpoint of applying them on a more consistent basis.
And this is also talking about wall signs and monument signs, and I think we talked about this when we read the sign ordinance, that, you know, we can't, there was some discussion at that point about redoing this to separate those, because it has to be different on how you apply wall signs versus monument signs, because it's talking about both. When you have it on the side of a brick wall, it's going to be completely different when it's on the road or on a, you know, one was the second picture in this example, where there's a list of, you know, 10 businesses.
There are you know, multiple pages to the sign section in the architectural design standards. I made a copy of the one that was, you know, relevant for this discussion, but, you know, there's guidelines for specific types of signs, whether they be wall, ground, that sort of thing. Then there's even more specific guidelines for when you're in the town center area, which again, technically we are, but those apply almost uniformly to the wall signs. So, you know, there's several things in there that we probably need to discuss and make sure that, you know, that we are all on the same page on how to apply those.
Well, you touched on the comment I was going to make. There are a number of pages, not just in this guide for the signage, but just all of it. This is a large guide. A lot of time was spent on it, but at the same time, you can't always get everything exactly right the first time. That's why the real world comes into play, and you have to start developing it and moving it along as you see things. And I think that's kind of where we are.
And we might even have to, you know, propose an amendment to the sign ordinance, even though we did it recently, and put some language in there, you know, that, you know, provides the board with, you know, a little bit more, you know, flexibility to consider all those factors, or at least make it clear that, you know, that you have that, so that, you know, when you're going through this, you know, this sort of evaluation process, it's clearer. So.
It also says to emphasize rather than overshadow the building features. So in this sign, are we emphasizing the features of the building versus overshadowing the features of the building? It would sound like maybe the view and light, or at least colors in the view, at least would emphasize it. But I don't think it overshadows.
And just for clarity, again, you talked earlier about the wall sign. Which wall sign was approved? Or has there not been?
There hasn't been any wall sign applications yet for this one. Okay, so,
What did you send in for the wall sign, if you don't mind us asking? Okay. The same basically is what we're seeing up here.
There'll actually be two of them, one facing the entrance right, and one facing Campbell Station right.
and that's something new in the ordinance that, that they can do that now on a corner like that.
Okay. All right, we've had a lot of good discussion tonight on this one. Is there further discussion or questions?
One thing that I would note, and I didn't ask Pat to fix this, because I wasn't sure which way you would go on the sign, but, the landscaping on this illustration does not meet standards, so you'll have.
Is there anything additional you'd like to add while you're here?
I'm just glad I brought it, that you guys discussing signs. There comes a point in time where you, a little bit of common sense, has to come into play. And the way you got to actually use that, I appreciate it very much.
All right.
Well, I don't know, you haven't voted yet, so.
If this passes, we want a floating, some type of, report to the Farragut Press.
Glowing review, that's it, right?
This time I'll just keep my mouth shut. You'll be in the plus column.
All right, any further discussion? All right, do I hear a motion from the board?
I'll move to approve this sign, subject to the background material being used and the landscaping requirements are met.
And I want to clarify, you're approving the lighter color background sign that matches the building, or you're motioning for that?
And also having it surveyed in for the survey to make sure it gets put at the setback line, because it is close. Basically, my original, except on the lighter background, and then transfer the landscaping over onto this.
All right. All right, so we have that motion. Do we have a second? All right, we've got a second by Mr. Wright, and the original motion by Alderman Pinchot. With that, we'll call for a roll call vote.
Mr. Armstrong? Chairman Lehman?
No. Yes.
Ms. Moore? Alderman Pinchot? Ms. Stowe? And Mr. Wright? Okay.
Thank you. No, I was just clarifying. What you did. No. All right, well, we'll move down to the next item on the agenda, which is the Blockbuster Property Shopping Center ground sign. And if you're new to town, you probably don't know where Blockbuster is or was, but 11135 Kingston Pike is the address. It was very popular at one time. I've been there for the short time I was there.
This application came in. It was missing a number of things. They've updated it a bit since I sent the packet out, but I haven't really had an opportunity to review it. And we also need to do some coordination with the landscaping plan. So, staff's recommendation on this application is to just defer it and table it until next month's meeting, so they can get with the landscape architect and sort some issues out. What they're proposing here is a tenant panel sign. They have to raise the base. They didn't have the minimum 2-foot base in. They've done that, at least on the drawing that they've resubmitted. It's going to have a number of tenant panels. If you remember on the at a previous meeting, y'all reviewed a landscape plan. The sign was up here. You know, the sign was up here in the corner. That's still where they're proposing it. They've taken some trees out in that area, and that's going to need to be coordinated to make sure that they have enough tree coverage within the parking spaces, so that they have adequate coverage there, and that everything else is going to meet the regulations from a landscaping standpoint. So I spoke to the designer on Friday after I sent the packets out. He contacted me and said they were working on it. And he understood the coordination that needed to happen there on the landscape side. And he was in the process of making corrections to the actual sign plan. But the packet had already gone out, and I knew I probably wasn't going to have time to re-review it all. So he understood the referral recommendation. But they have provided this color rendering up in the corner. I'll get them to do it larger. Again, this is one that, is it technically going to match the building? Yeah, it's a light building, the green roof, but, are you going to want it all light sign like that? Might you want the top part there with the address be in the dark green and light panels? Again, I'm going to have to ask them to come up with a couple of different iterations on this to present to you to get a sense of what it looks like. So they are in the process. This is one of the new drawing sheets that they sent over on Friday afternoon. They've increased the brick base from 2 foot, that sort of thing. Still need to check the landscaping around the sign, but I also need to make sure that the landscaping they've taken out and some of the changes they're now proposing on this landscaping plan, it doesn't match the last one. So I need to get straight to them which landscaping they're proposing to do, to make sure it's coordinated. And if they start putting smaller trees around the sign, is then that going to leave them short for the rest of the landscaping plan? So that really needs to be coordinated. I would just recommend that you defer. It came in incomplete. It was incomplete until Friday afternoon, and the landscaping is still not complete.
Okay, well, we understand that they haven't submitted everything, but could you go back to that slide right there, that slide? So, but it looks to me like what they are working towards here, their early proposal, appears to be a good-looking sign. I mean, the brick L-shaped and...
Yeah, I think if you look at this one on the color, anyway, it will be. It'll be brick to match it. It's a light colored brick because the brick on the building is light. And then a tenant panel sign in a nice landscaped area. They are proposing some nice landscaping in there. I've got to check what they're proposing to put in, but I quick looked at it, it seems okay. And then, but again, we got to make sure that it's integrated into the rest.
Mm-hmm.
And they've changed a lot at the front there from the plan we looked at, I think it was back in December.
Okay. Well, as preliminary feedback for them, I think they're on the right track. Given the circumstances,
Coloring on that, showing up there on the top. Are you going to want some more dark color background on this part of that sign? I'll talk to them about that and see if they can come up with another something that would be a little more compatible with both the building and the standard.
all right, go ahead.
What do you think you're doing with the landscape part of this litigation a couple months back? We want to
to put it back in the same place it was, as long as it meets all the setback requirements for the size of the sign that they're proposing to do. So they can move it to another site, another area on the site.
I guess I'm a little confused. I'd like to put the new sign back in the same location, and it didn't look like that was the old location. So I'm confused with what it was going. Just check.
Yeah.
Make sure it's where they're saying.
Well, yeah, and again, we need to coordinate that, to make sure that they're all on the same page.
Are there any other questions or comments for staff on this one before we move on? All right. Do we have them? Yeah, no. Yeah, I was getting there. Do we have a motion on the Blockbuster location? All right, we have a motion by Ms. Moore to defer. Do we have a second? A second by Alderman Pinchot. If you would call a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Armstrong? Yes. Chairman Raymond?
Yes.
Ms. Moore? Yes. Alderman Pinchot?
Yes.
Ms. Stowe? Yes. Mr. Wright?
Yes.
All right, so we're going to move down now to the landscape plan application section of the agenda. The first one tonight is the Villages of Farragut Phase 2 at 230 Village Commons Boulevard. And with that, I'll turn it over to staff.
It's a fairly extensive landscaping plan, although really the parts that fall under the ordinance that you're reviewing are the area around the detention basin there that's along Smith Road, and then the buffer strip that's down along the lower portion of the plan, the bottom edge of the plan. So this area and this area. We reviewed it, they're using all good species in there. There are a couple that we might sub out. Okay. But, it's in good shape. Originally, it was shy 2 understory trees on here in the first 200-foot section of the buffer. They've since corrected that, so really the plan can be approved as it's been submitted now. They've added the 2 understory trees to that area. I've got a revised plan sheet.
Okay. Questions, comments from staff? Ms. Moore? None? All right. Ms. Stowe, do you have any comments or questions? Alderman Pinchot? Mr. Armstrong? Mr. Wright? Mr. Rogers?
Pass.
That was fast. All right. I don't really have any either. I think they've done a good job. So with that, do we have a motion?
I move that.
I have a motion for approval by Mr. Armstrong. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Wright. Doesn't look like there's an applicant present, so I suspect there are no amendments. So I guess we'll move on to the vote.
Okay. Mr. Armstrong? Chairman Lehman?
Yes.
Ms. Moore? Yes. Mr. Pinchot?
Yes.
Ms. Stowe? Yes. And Mr. Wright? Yes. Okay, so the motion passes.
All right, so the last item on our landscape plan application agenda is for the Farragut Town Center at Biddle Farm Development, located principally off Kingston Pike and Brookline. So the applicant has already requested this item be removed from the agenda and deferred until next month. So with that, we don't really need to take any action, or do we? Okay.
It was withdrawn. They sent an email in. It's a massive plan, and they're just, there's still some questions about where some commercial buildings, exactly how large they may be, and it was just kind of premature for them to put it in. What they may do is is bring it in phases. You know, so the landscaping for the apartments and the detention basins, some of the things that they're sure where they're going, and then come in with, you know, with a second phase for other parts of it. Because I mean, they had a landscape plan for the entire development. And it was,
It's massive.
yeah, it was big. But, you know, but they didn't have a lot of the species for the different trees specced out and that sort of thing. So we, you know, we couldn't really review it, but, yeah. Yeah, I could plot some out if somebody wants to come in and look at them in the town hall. Yeah, I can do that.
All right, well, that's the last item on the printed agenda. Is there anything additional we need to know about?
Yeah, two things. One is Cindy Holyfield has decided not to reapply for this year. Her term was up, and she opted not to resubmit. So, you know, the town will be taking applications, or has taken applications for, you know, people that want to be on boards, and the town board will appoint a new member, probably start in July, and probably be appointed in June and start in July. And then we have applications for a new student representative. This is the end of Jake's term coming up here, so you know, we'll be getting a new student representative. We have 3 applications. I'll send them out to you either later this week or the first of next week. I didn't want there to be any confusion with you thinking that, you know, you'd be voting on people, or, you know, voting for appointments this month. It'll be done next month. So in June, you'll be selecting a new student rep for the next term, you know, for the next year.
All right, was there anything else, Bart?
No, that's it.
All right, Brandon?
I think that just feeling, there was a couple of comments made towards the end of the meeting, but I'm expecting that he comes here a lot and hasn't said anything.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, you know, we can't make everyone happy when we're you know, reviewing things and making recommendations, so we just kind of go with it.
It's like kudos to Jake for coming, because he didn't have to, he's regular. Appreciate his consistency and
Well, he's fulfilling his obligation, right?
I'll go to UTC and do an ROTC there.
Well, I guess we'll officially adjourn.